Welcome to this special episode of the Newcom podcast. It's October, which means it's Black History Month here in the UK, a month where we recognise and celebrate the invaluable contributions of black people to British society. And the theme this year of Black History Month is saluting our sisters, highlighting the crucial role that black women have played in shaping history and inspiring change and in building communities. And as part of this, recognising and celebrating within our own context at New Community, I'm thrilled to be joined by a sister, or I should probably say auntie, who has pioneered and shaped and inspired and played a significant part in building this church community over nearly 20 years. Yemi Kalajo, how
Hello.
are you?
I'm very good. Thank you, James.
Good. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
As we kind of discuss this journey, really, I guess, that we as a church here at New Community have been on for, you've been longer than I have. So how long? We arrived in 2005. When did you guys arrive in this church?
Think about, will be 19 years?
19 years.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's like, I can't do any
I
maths.
can't do any maths either.
Before us. 2004, 3, 4, something like that.
2003. Yeah, 2003, I think.
We'll be approaching 20 years. Wow. Well, yes. Look, as we kind of salute our sisters in Black History Month and kind of look back on our journey, there are lots of women and men, obviously, who have played a significant part. But you have been here a long time.
Very long time, yeah.
And you've seen huge change in the life of our church. So therefore, in many ways, you are in a unique position to tell the story. Take us back to 19-ish, nearly 20 years ago. What was it like, New Community, when you first arrived? What was your initial experiences?
Oh, wow. Yes, that is a very long time ago. And yes, I can still remember it very vividly, actually. I remember the very first time we walked through those doors, and I can remember myself and my husband and the three girls, well, three young ladies, even though they were girls then, walking through. And I remember the person that welcomed us at the door. That's how vivid I remember it.
Wow.
Because how welcoming she was. And she took us straight through because she had to take the kids to the back. Right. And it was a surreal experience. And the reason I remember it so vividly is because it was a huge impact on my life, that very first year of coming to New Community Church. I think it would be good for me to give a brief background of how we actually came to New Community Church, because I think that will help. Obviously, we're Nigerian. I'm Nigerian, and I'm talking about my husband as well, Nigerian. So we have been in a black majority, I would say all Nigerian church, not actually black majority, all Nigerian church for such a long time, since being in the UK. And then we were settled, we were happy, lots of friends, doing what God called us to do in leadership and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden we started to feel this unease about how God has not brought us all the way from Nigeria to just come and settle and be with the same people as us, that God has put so much in us that we have to offer, and we also have so much to learn. And so that's how this journey began, of actually, what does that look like for us? And so we left the old Nigerian church and we went to a church close by to where we live. And that's a different story, which I won't go into today. Anyway, it was a Baptist church. It was very different from anything we'd ever known. And but we were there for a couple of years, and God did great things. However, the girls were very young, and we were the youngest in the church, and that didn't feel right. And so we thought, actually, well, we need to move on. We need to move on. And then so we started praying and asking God, where does he want us to go? So that's how our journey started. So we visited a few churches in the area, went to Bromley, Dartford, just looking for churches that were diverse. That was the main thing, because we felt we needed a church where there would be people that was not all Nigerians, not all black, white people. We're in this country, we're here for a purpose, and we need to be able to mix and worship with people that are different from us. So that's how we started looking. But we also had two other things on the list. It had to be a spirit-filled church that believed in the Holy Spirit and were not ashamed of publicly displaying the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Yeah. And they had to have good kids work. So those were three things we were looking for. And so that's how we stepped into New Community Church. And I still remember it so clearly, because the first thing we saw was the fact that it was not diverse. However, the kids at the end of the service really enjoyed the service. They really had a great time and they came back buzzing.
Great.
And then
Well done, kids team.
it was charismatic. There was worship and there was singing in the spirit on the stage, which I'd never seen before. I never knew what people actually could speak in tongues. And it was like, wow, what is happening here?
Do you know what? That's such a kind of thing. So a few years ago when I was, sorry, we'll come back to your story in a sec, but a few years ago when I was on my sabbatical and I went around a bunch of different churches and I went to a massive, and I mean massive, black majority church, right? And up in London, a very famous one. And there was like 3 white people in the room, me and 2 other people, which was an experience in and of itself, probably a bit like what you experienced in the reverse. But then there was this moment in worship and everyone kind of slightly encouraged singing. So I just went for it, like singing in tongues and stuff. And this, I'll never forget it. This lady turned around kind of with a smile on her face, look at me. Yeah. But then she did that double take when she realized it was a white person. And in the meet and greet bit in the middle, she was like, "You speak in tongues?" As if like, and I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "You're white." It was an interesting thing. So you found white people who speak in tongues?
Yes, we found white people who spoke in tongues, and that was so refreshing. In fact. And so we had to come to a decision of whether this is what we wanted to do as a family. But there was no question in our mind. Our minds already made up, even though we did not have that diverse element of our 3 criteria that we were looking for. But God did something in our hearts on that day. He just told us this is where we needed to be, and we had peace about it. And so that's how the journey started.
That's really cool. I mean, I kind of remember when we first arrived, went for a similar journey, probably met by the same person, I would imagine, on that. She was on every week, and brought in and yeah, we had a kind of similar kind of list in many ways. Needed to be word and spirit and people, like a diverse range of people and even nation stuff, because obviously Han grew up overseas and lived in a multicultural context and all that kind of stuff. And it kind of, it wasn't, was it? In many ways, it was fairly fair, not totally, but fairly monoculture, right?
Yes.
So now, we'll get into some of the journey, but part of Black History Month is recognizing and celebrating. I love that. It's recognizing the contribution, but celebrating, and then also challenging some stuff, which we'll come to that later. But I think just if we kind of transpose that onto New Community in the last 19 years, recognizing and celebrating what God's done, and in many ways, it's an intentional journey, right? It starts with a biblical conviction. Of seeing something and then an action and faith to see it through. So I guess some people listening to this and watching this, particularly if they were at our One Church celebration a few weeks ago, would have kind of go, what? Because you look at it now, 40 plus different nations, people from lots of different colours and creeds and all sorts of things. You probably say, what do you mean? Kind of from your sort of perspective, like what's been some of the, I don't know, the journey or the key moments or...
Yeah, I think it's very important that we're doing what we're doing now, but actually telling this story, because it's very easy for people that are sort of new to our church just to assume that the church has always been like this. And remembering is something that the Bible actually challenges us to do, because as human beings, we easily forget stuff.
Oh, totally.
And also, when we remember God and also remember the things God has done, it sort of builds confidence into us and helps us to take our eyes off what's impossible to actually look at the God that can do things that are possible. And so when you hear that actually almost 19 years ago, there was just one black family in New Community Church, and then you look today and you think, oh my goodness, was that even a possibility? It's like, no, in humanly speaking, it's not possible. But remembering is this active, intentional decision to remember where God has brought us from and to look at actually, because God has done this, God is able to do so much more. And we know by faith that God is able to do so much more. And so going back to how and how it started, I remember very then that there was an intentional heart that the elders of the church had for diversity. And that was one of the things that kept us. Because I remember then that not most of the elders they're not around now. Well, there was Steve Blaber, he was very passionate about diversity, and he will come and sort of talk to us that we've been praying for a very long time for people that are different to join us, but we're so glad you're answered to prayer. And people, even like Nick Lewis, people coming alongside and say, guys, God has brought you here for a purpose. And so we could see that actually people have been praying for years that things will change, even though there has not been a physical manifestation of that change. So, but there have been perseverance and faith and asking God. And then this black family sort of rocked up, and it was like, oh wow, answer to prayer.
Yeah.
And thank God that God gave us the tenacity
and
to
grace.
and grace to be able to weather the storm. And because it was not easy, it was an intentional, active decision to actually follow through what God has put on our hearts. God specifically told us to be there. And even though things were not easy, it was not things we were used to. People were different from us. We felt, and I think one of my passions was that the children, my 3 girls, they were already different in school because of where we live. They were the only people that were different in their class. And so I didn't want church to become actually they come to church, they're also the only ones that are different. So that was one thing I struggled with for quite a long time.
Yeah.
But God sort of said, no, this is where you needed to be. And we had to obey God, and we're so grateful that we did, because looking back now, we see that God had actually had work that he needed to do. And it could have, if we did not obey, he would have used somebody else. But we're glad that we stuck around, and we look back now, we're so grateful for what God has done.
I mean, there's so much in there that's super encouraging. And I think just to pick up on a point there, we've, over the last couple of years, been reminded prophetically again, Genesis 26, redig the wells, that which is there in the history and in the DNA for a new generation. And part of the reason that prophetic word a couple of years ago really resonated is because, and you've heard me talk about this, but when Dave kind of was in the process of handing over the church to me, and we were talking about transition, I was picked out in a meeting, and somebody kind of said, I don't know if there's any leadership transition stuff going on with you at the moment. And it was one of these moments, there is, but I can't acknowledge that there is. And then just prophesied this redig the wells stuff, and from Genesis, and so that's always formed stuff. And so actually for me, that thing, because again, part of our story of why we just felt God really cement us in here, lots of things, but the nations thing particularly, from an early stage, new community, when we arrived, and I think it's always been in the history, in the DNA, has been a church for the nations. But historically, that was kind of sending people from here to the nations, or through the ministry of Dave and Liz, who are traveling to nations. Literally, when we arrived here, they lived in a different nation for a period of time. And then that redigging is not just a church for, but a church of. In the last probably 10 years or so, really, we need to accelerate that. It's always been there, but what's that look like in a new generation? And then we'll come to it maybe later, but what's been redug in the last couple of years again is not just, it's been once again a church not just of nations, but for nations, kind of come full circle in that. So I would agree, it's always been there. What had perhaps been missing, I don't know, I don't want to comment in one sense, but I wonder whether actually let's put it a different way. What has been accelerated in the last 10 years? Because for a while, when we arrived, I think there might have been 2 non-white families in the church. And then kind of a little bit, I suppose, of social change, demographical change in the neighborhoods or whatever. Good, but then really the story began to be picked up and intensified over the last probably 10 years. And I think a lot of that is to just do with the intentionality of stuff. So are there kind of some key things, moments you remember, or significant steps along the journey that you felt were important?
I think one significant step, I think the beginning of that journey was actually when we as a church moved to Crown Woods. I think that God did a massive thing in the whole of the church then, because we stopped seeing ourselves as a middle class sit-up church. We moved to a completely different neighborhood in Eltham. We were meeting in a school hall, and so the church changed. And I remember when we came back, it was like a different mindset to how we approach church. And then for over this past 10 years, I think with you, James, you've actually now intentionally, because this is something God has placed on your heart as well, you have been proactive in us being intentional in making this diversity something that we fight for and we see exhibited in every area of church life. And I think one of the major key moments for me will be when we did that Race and Grace series, for example. That was a key moment. I think for me, it's about the heart change that happens and that God does over time. And I think that's that's what's exciting about how God works. God doesn't change us in one day. God over time just molds our heart, shapes us, drops truth into our heart, and all of a sudden we realize that actually we're different. And I think that Race and Great series actually began something in New Community Church whereby we are able to talk freely and be more at liberty in talking about race and grace, because sometimes these things but you don't necessarily talk about them. You just sort of muddle along and think everything is okay as long as I don't sort of ruffle anybody's feathers. I just do my own thing, you do your own thing. But when we now begin to openly talk about that, I believe that was a breakthrough for us. We began to actually, this is an issue.
So that is key, right? Because I look back through some of my notes because I was thinking, not in prep for this, but recently, like, look, when did we start kind of talking about this? Because I think wonderfully, in many ways, lots of churches have started recognizing, we really need to, particularly in urban things over the last couple of years, but we've been doing it for a lot longer than that. And it was actually 2012, I think, when I first preached or talked about it in this. And then 2014, I did an explicit sermon on race and racism. And in my naivety, I was like, we've done it now. We've cracked it. Like, here we go. We've kind of, we've got we've talked about it. We've acknowledged it. We've said the story. We've done the public repentance moment that perhaps needed to do. And then you kind of roll forward, and then actually, even to be honest, Dio becoming an elder when did he become an elder? I can't remember. At some point after 2014.
Yes.
Because I started leading in 2015, I think.
I think it was the next year.
So then it was, Dio was the first. Anyway, and in my, again, naivety of trying to, like, sort of Dio being the first non-white elder in this church, and you kind of think, glass ceiling, if there was one, smashed. Now it's like visually that which we've talked about and said in one sermon once, now is there, and obviously it didn't quite happen. But then moving forward, I think what Race and Grace did, which was 2018, 19, something like that, 18, I think. What that did was just open the conversation more, didn't it, and pushed it out. And I mean, how did you? It's good to open that conversation, but how did you find, was that comfortable experience, an easy experience? Were there some challenges in that?
There was some challenging experiences, I would say, and I think because we had the series, the preaching in the church, and then the discussion within community, and then we had that chatting that we did as well, just to explore some areas into deeper level. I think it was challenging because he actually brought to light where people were at. And I think that's interesting because sometimes you assume that people know things or people understand stuff. But I think what that brought out was actually, no, we can't assume. We always have to talk about things and understand where people are at rather than thinking that that's people behave this way because people don't know. And I think to me, it revealed a whole level of ignorance sometimes in how we deal with one another because we sometimes lack wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I'd find it really comfortable because I've preached on it publicly. I don't mind. I'm thoroughly biblically convinced. I'm not politically correct in the slightest. I couldn't care less. So I've never been bothered about that aspect of stuff. And I don't mind sometimes being a bit, whatever the word is. And I think the reality is in leadership, right? Sometimes if you're thoroughly biblically convinced and you believe God is leading you, you have to be a bit hard-nosed sometimes about it and fight through on some push on some stuff. So I was thinking, everyone, it's not a problem. It's gonna be, oh man, was there some stuff that came out of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I got some stuff at me which I was not expecting. Like really not. So you as a black person must have experienced some of that, right?
Yes. I think it was just in the conversations, and it's. I think it comes as a shock to you when some things just come out and you're thinking, oh, okay. But it's good that we're having those kind of conversations because otherwise we're not going to grow and we're not going to move from where we're at. So we always have to feel uncomfortable at some point. Either way, wherever you're from, you have to feel that sense of being uncomfortable because that is what it means to be a diverse church in reality. Yeah. Because we can talk about being diverse from now till eternity. And if nothing changes in our lives as individuals, if we are not challenged or provoked in any way to feel the need, that doesn't sound right or feel right, then it means actually, no, you're just talking the talk. You need to walk the walk. It means you're going to feel uncomfortable about either something, the way somebody said something to you or the way you said something to somebody.
Well, it's not even what you say. It's like, if you actually think about it biblically, and this is the journey we've been on, right, and learning, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, hopefully, but it's not actually about diversity. That's not the goal.
Yes.
Like, the new heavens and the new earth, yes, they're going to be diverse, but they're not just going to be diverse, like you in your area and me in my area, right? They're going to be reconciled.
Yes.
There's going to be this perfect unity amidst great diversity. Yes. And that stuff, it's not just the Revelation 5 and the Revelation 7 stuff of people from every tribe and every tongue and every blah, 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 right? Oh, yeah, great. There's all, which is great. That sounded a bit flippant. It wasn't meant to be. It would be wonderful. But actually, it's the Revelation 21 stuff as well about the kings of this earth will bring the glory of their culture in.
Yes.
So what in that, it's not just diversity is not the goal. It's this reconciliation, not just reconciliation. You and me are now friends because we once weren't. Blah, blah, blah. But now we are. Yeah. But of the cultural reconciliation and beauty and tapestry or whatever the language is of... and I think a lot of people want diversity. They just don't want the culture. Yes. I really want people with different colour skin as long as they like all the stuff I like.
Exactly. And they just do the things the way you do it, which is not real.
But what I found, right, in that period, which I learned so much and have done since as well, like you think you know stuff and then you realise you are nowhere near where you thought, right? And you've got so many lessons still to learn. But what I was surprised by, I expected pushback from certain quarters, like, because people don't like change. So I expected that. And to be fair, didn't get as much of that as I thought I would. Like, I think there's a genuine heart's desire in the vast majority of people to really build this thing. It's just like how. And we'll come to how later, but... But I also got pushback from places I didn't expect.
Yeah.
Like, I was genuinely shocked when black people told me I talked about this too much. I was like, what? What are you talking about? And that, so, I mean, come on. Like, between you, me, and the whole world listening, you must have had some pushback from places you didn't expect.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I remember having this conversation with somebody that was black as well and saying, actually, why is this an issue? I don't see it as an issue. Why are we talking about this thing all the time? And so I just rightly pointed out to him, I said, how many people in your life would you genuinely say that you are actually friends with that are not black? I said, that's why. Because it's not just about coming to church on the Sunday. We're all here. It's nice to see people from 40 different nations here. But then when it comes during the week, can we actually say, no, actually, I am being reconciled. And I am learning how to actually do life with somebody that's different from me. And because that's not easy. Because, one of the things I remember at the very beginning, when I first came here, was actually because I've not really had a close relationship with somebody that was white or different from me. I mean, apart from obviously at work, you just see people, colleagues, that kind of thing. But to actually have a close relationship with, as a friend, I think that was one of my challenges because I didn't know how to do it. Because what do you talk about? What do we have in common? I don't even understand the jokes sometimes. So I have to be, sometimes at work, people you just laugh along so that the odd one. I don't understand the jokes. It's like, what do we have in common? So, but apart from Jesus Christ. So for you to fight that thing that, you have Jesus in common, but there are other things that you can learn from one another and begin to grow together. It takes a lot of work.
Oh, it's so much
a lot of time.
And I think that again, if you spend, whether you're black, white, from wherever part of the world you're from, if you spend the time in majority culture, like monoculture,
Yes.
you just until you spend time in another thing, you don't really realize
No.
it. So for me, even like with all like, yes, same thing of making friends with people who are different and hung out with people, lots of different people from different things, and count lots of people from different nations and whatever as friends. So only when I remember, it wasn't even so long ago, it was in a context in my own house where we were racially in the minority, and you're doing the kind of drinks thing, you're going getting drinks, and come back to the table with some drinks, and everyone there was all from a certain different racial nation, different ethnic group, whatever, and they were all joking, and there was lots of laughter, and I kind of just thought, I'm kind of come and sit and join in. I had no idea what they're talking about. They were making jokes about things I didn't understand, that I didn't know, and I'm like, man, I'm in my own house, and I can't join in. And I had this moment where I was like, my gosh, this is what it's like for so many people having to jump across, and in those moments, like, but these are dear people, they're called friends. Do you know? Very practically, I went and learned about Nigerian politics as a result of that, because like I didn't know who the butt of all the jokes were, and I didn't know why they were funny, and I didn't know why this and the other. I mean, I'm not an expert on Nigerian politics, but we'll get there. Yeah. Well, look, I think this it's great to be having this kind of conversation. I think. We will take a short break, and we will pick up with some of the practical how-tos, what we've done, what you've done as a church, as individuals, and where we think we should go next. So we'll take a break, and we will be back for part 2 later.